Bonjour Claire, good morning. I remember I've discovered your technology that was 2 years ago. It was at the Big Data Paris show, and you did a presentation about your technology, and I was very curious to better understand what you do. So after your talk, I've contacted you, and we have decided to do a meetup together to show your technology. But at the end, we did a conference together, and Groupe La Poste, the postal office, the French postal office, did a nice testimony about your technology. But I wanted to have you and have you to talk about your technology and go deeper in details. So welcome to this Data Sommelier talk show, and up to you to do the show now.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, usually we like, of course, when our clients or community talk about us. So today it will be mostly myself talking about Pathway. So Pathway has been around for a few years now, and we are a company known for our work with AI data pipelines, many of which are built to serve real-time applications. And that's where we have most of our use cases, both from the community, which has been growing around Pathway, and our enterprise users.
Yeah, I was curious about your framework because in the past it was presented this way, batch and real time in the same box, in the same architecture, and I was curious to understand how we can do that really, because you can find many technologies batch oriented, some others who are real time or streaming oriented, but it's not so common to have both together in one solution.
Yeah, definitely. So we made the bet of doing a unified data processing engine. Unified in the sense that you could work with static data, and you could work with streaming data, and you could go from one to the other very easily with just changing the mode in one line of code in Python. So that's also something of interest for probably the audience listening to us, is that while it is a Rust engine underneath, there's a Python API which makes it significantly easier to build those pipelines.
Oh yes, Python is the king, and Rust is something mandatory to get performance, the expected performance. Yes, so good choice, I guess.
It's been, yeah, it's been nice so far.
Okay, so we've prepared some. You have prepared some slides, so let's go through some of them.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, as mentioned, kind of very briefly, Pathway, we've known each other for a couple of years now, and we've seen great traction since with the tool. So today we have like a clear momentum with developers. If you go on GitHub slash pathway.com, then you'll have the repos available where you'll see, of course, the code is the source. It's the source is available. You'll see also a number of application templates that you can go through, and that will help you have a use case up and running in less than 1 hour. And so this has actually quite nicely, we were the first trending GitHub repository um, on December last
Oh yes.
year. Yeah, so that was pretty nice, and a nice testimony of what's happening with the community. And then we also, of course, identified, we started more targeting enterprise users initially in terms of clients. And so we've been identified as a visionary by Gartner, both in the ETL space, so like the stream processing space, as well as the RAG engineering landscape. And so today we just discussed La Poste as well, which was very kind to share a few insights on how they're using us, how they used us for a number of use cases, including for the French Olympics and Paralympics games, where we had a few nice showcases of how real-time data processing makes sense. And then we also have been working with some pretty big names, including NATO. We have a few like Formula One team, Transdev, and a few other. players we can discuss.
Congratulations for that. As a reminder, I remember the number of stars last year, 12 months ago, that was something like 2,600. So it's a 10 times improvement. Bravo.
Thanks. Yeah, we've had a incredible community support. We've also worked on some boot camps internally. So we have 18,000 people who've been trained in using Pathway,
Wow.
and that's Mudit on our side who's kind of been building this engine. And it's been amazing to see feedback from learners and people building the use cases and sharing with us what they're doing. It's pretty
Okay.
cool.
Okay. So I have many questions, but I keep them for later. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, happy to go through them as as you want to ask them.
Yeah, I had one because 18,000 users or people train on that. I guess so. You have to start with a kind of Python background. How long it takes to be comfortable with the pathway framework if you already know Python?
Yeah, so actually we've tried to, in a way, lower the bar as much as possible to make it super accessible. So there are a number of pipelines that are YAML, so you can just set them up in YAML, and that's literally like super easy. So we've had like people in high school and like first year in kind of computer science who build their use cases for fun and trying it out. So you can start with the YAML pipelines. They're pre-configured so that they can run easily. And then we also, because we have this vibrant community, we now have like people on Discord who are willing to help like other users in our own team and so on. So really in less than 1 hour, you can be up and running. And then if you're familiar with Python, you can do, of course, a bit more play around and understand the structure of the showcases or build your pipeline from beginning to end yourself as well. And we have some clients who, of course, operate under kind of very specific lines of businesses, and only them know what they really want to do, and they are able to do it themselves.
Okay. And what's the trend for you? Do you see many users using YAML or they switch to Python immediately? So, yeah.
No, a lot of people start by using YAML, and it's because it's so easy and it works. Like you need to have a reason to like change it and so on, and you can change like a lot of the pre-configured things very easily. So it's really if you want to extend the features and so on that you would want to use Python.
Okay, good. Okay. So, quick question. So, how did you start with this ID? What was the first ID? Why pathway?
Yeah, so it's a pretty long story, but a nice one. So Susanna, the CEO of the company, she was initially doing her PhD on forecasting of maritime trade, and was dealing a lot with the geospatial data, and especially real-time geospatial data. And by talking to a lot of industrial players, we soon realized that there wasn't the infrastructure layer needed to process this data very easily. And so it's really, we wanted to provide this like engineering layer to help data engineers and developers um, build their pipelines much more easily and not having to focus on the plumbing as much, but really on delivering the end value. And that's why we have a number of, let's say, geospatial type of clients and use cases, because that's where we started, and we know we're pretty good at this. But it's since expanded to other verticals, of course.
Good, excellent. So many logistic and supply chain customers.
Yeah, a number of them. We love things that move in time and space,
Yeah,
but we love other use cases as well.
excellent. Okay, it makes sense. Good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so really like the starting point, as we were just discussing, was that in today's world, static data means missed opportunities. Um, like traditionally, data and AI applications have kind of relied on endless development cycles. When there's a new type of data sets and so on, you need to rebuild the pipeline, and it's a lot of back and forth uh, just to kind of deliver the use case, meaning that a number of data teams weren't like fully happy with how things were being done, and as well like the more businessy people and the organizations have kind of come to the realizations that this meant it kind of cost more money. You don't get as good as the like super good results, or they're not up to date, and you're kind of losing business opportunities as well when you're not working with up to date data. And so that's something we've been trying to address. But this is really just the fact is that um, like today the world, like we've seen more and more AI development as well, and so now we see kind of this pressure on the developers to deliver kind of AI use cases and AI pipelines and so on, while business users are expecting to have always up to date data. And so that's something like we've discussed before, like in the pure data engineering world we would call it streaming. It's not necessarily understood as such by business users, but it's really like, how do I make sure that I deliver up to date data to my end users? And
Mhm.
if you take the context, the for example, a real time RAG application, so real time augmented generation application, um, if you ask users, they won't tell you that they need kind of real time. But if they ask a question about a document that's been changed a few minutes ago, they would expect to have the answer from the latest version of the document. And so in this case, really like updating the index in real time is a real time use case by definition. It's just not always perceived as such.
Yeah, okay. We can maybe compare this with a kind of micro batch, a series of micro batch coming from the need, the business need.
Yes, sometimes microbatch is enough, and sometimes it's not. So it really depends on the use case and the
Yes.
scale of operations and what it means to everyone.
Yeah, and
Also.
if I remember well, 2 years ago, your talk was already about RAG. So,
Hmm.
yeah, and you demonstrated something very easy to implement without the need to implement a vector database,
Yep.
if I remember well. And I was seduced by that. Just something simple to implement.
Yeah, so the nice part about RAG is indeed we're not entirely new to this let's say line of business and series of use cases. Um, the bet we're making is that Pathway Core Engine, so really our live data processing framework, is doing the vector indexing.
Okay.
So we have this in-memory index done by the engine, which really allows this real-time reactivity, and it also avoids like you don't need a vector database, so you don't need to make additional investment on your side to kind of build those use cases, which can end up being pretty appealing when a lot of organizations are looking a bit more today at like return of an investment and total cost of ownerships of those solutions.
Yeah, okay. It makes sense to have a kind of all-in-one package, including this homemade vector database or something like that, built-in database. Yeah.
Yeah, built an
Okay.
index, yeah, sure.
Built-in index. Yes.
Yeah, and so that's really like how we wanted to build this value chain. So we started like we have this live data processing framework where they can power real-time application. They can go from standard ETL use cases like data transformation with a very low latency, other real-time application, or more Gen AI or RAG applications. And so because we first had this live data streaming online on GitHub, we started seeing the community actually building those Gen AI applications, which for us is a great testimony. Like you really want to learn how your users are using you, and how they're see, seeing how Pathway can help them when they're building their use cases. And so last summer we starting to have this kind of boom of Gen AI applications, especially thanks to this in-memory indexing features that we were just discussing, where people were really looking at solution that can like scale and can be deployed very easily, while making sure that data governance and real-time data, like the data is always in sync. And that's where we started kind of seeing a
Okay.
lot of use cases.
And you call this live AI. And I like this because I have the feeling of simplicity behind that. Because sometimes we are a little bit afraid of playing with streaming. Streaming requires complex infrastructure, and live AI is something. Yeah, I like the concept of that live AI. It seems simple.
Yeah, we wanted a simple keyword to really express the fact that data engineering in this new kind of era of AI development will tend to gravitate towards faster moving kind of living data. We've had the like first generation of models which are trained until a certain time, and then everything that happens after is just the LLM is not aware of it, the language model. And so we're really moving towards model that we think eventually will learn in real time from what's happening and is being fed in real time with real time data sources.
Okay, so I understand that you can do ETL, but are you really on this analytical market? It's not. Is it your the place you want to be, or it's not really your target?
So ETL, we have a large share of our enterprise users and so on that use us for ETL purposes. The reason for this is maybe twofold. On one side, we have the performance aspect. So on the number like performance benchmarks, we ended up doing better than Flink or Kafka Streams or Spark Streaming. So people who are looking at the performance aspect of things do use us, and we also have people who they don't actually need like very low latency. They still need real time, but they're not really up to the milliseconds. But they do need, and what they really care about is ease of use.
Yes.
And it's really like, how do I make sure that with the team that I have and the resources that I have internally, I have enough autonomy to build my own pipelines. And that's how we really thought of it as a developer framework. We didn't want to, as much as we love helping our clients, like building their first use case, we really want them to be as autonomous as they can be as quickly as possible. And that's enabled thanks to that. It's the ease of use of that comes with Pathway.
Okay, very clear. So you focus more on the value proposition, right? I was talking about logistic and supply chain. So maybe you have some use case around that.
Yeah, for specifically for logistics and supply chains, in this kind of same platform, La Poste came and talked to about the use cases that we were doing together, which revolved around so IoT data processing. So in the case of La Poste, they 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 had already rolled out a number of IoT sensors, and they had collected more than 16 million data points, and something that this number was communicated during the conference. And it's a significant amount of data to be generated, and it was particularly hard for them to make sense of it with the tooling and so on. So they were really looking at reducing the total cost of ownership in general of the solution when you combine kind of hardware for data collection and then the data platform. And then they wanted flexibility. So they started and they knew a number of use cases that they wanted to use Pathway for. And so those were kind of pretty easy to do by nature in Pathway. But then they also knew that they needed a platform that would be able to scale with their needs, and that if they have a new use case, they should be able to internally, with their developers, which are great, to be able to prototype it very easily, to check the results, and not to spend kind of months in development time to see if this makes sense.
Yeah, and we have published the use case. It's in French, and
Mhm.
I will share the link with the community. But yeah, it was a very nice case study from La Poste. So thank you for that. If we can go back few slides, I've seen an architecture slide. Maybe we can spend few minutes on how it works really.
Yeah. Sure. So this is like the an architecture slide. And the way it works is it's pretty straightforward. I mean, at least we've tried to make it as easy as possible. So as input, you have your data sources. They can be static, they can be real time. You can really combine the two because it's a unified platform. We support more than 300 data sources from your, let's say, regular streaming ones like Kafka or Redpanda or NATS and so on. Um, and let's say for document search and RAG use cases, we would have SharePoint and Drive and S3 and so on. And so with this, we enable like really real-time synchronization, and that's the key value prop, right? That comes with the engine.
Okay.
And then this engine built in Rust uh, gives you the possibility to really um, design your AI pipeline. And you can do this in Python or with the um, YAML configuration as discussed. And you'll have real-time ETL pipelines and RAG pipelines, and we can discuss them a bit later. But something that has been pretty successful on our side over the past kind of 12 months is the release of application templates. So we now make it super easy for our users to build their use case and to have something up and running in less than 1 hour. And that's really like where we want to deliver value on. And so it means we have those templates, so you can start with those kind of ready to go pipelines. You can, of course, change. You have all the code, so you can change it as you want. It's really like not a black box. And then you can configure it.
Okay, so yeah, templates, this is the way to go, right? Just select the one you want, copy paste, update it with what is required, and boom, run your pipeline. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Which part is open source because you have an open source version, and which part is more oriented to enterprise?
Yeah. So it's source available online, both for the like the core engine, let's say, and the pipelines. And what we do is that we have restriction on the volume, so it's a RAM-based system. So you can have almost the entire version in the community version, but you'll be restricted on volume. And then there are a couple of connectors which are they're actually in our scale tier, so the middle one. So you just need to get a license key, which is free, to access those. And you'd have like SharePoint and Iceberg and Delta Lake, for instance, that would be part of this free tier that requires a license key.
Okay, so you can start for free
Mhm.
and build your application, and if you scale, you maybe need this enterprise version.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Very easy. Very easy. Okay, good. And you do not recommend specific technologies, so you are open to everything, right?
Yeah, we like to keep the options as open as they can be for our developers. We're happy to make recommendations sometimes when we see a specific use case and we've seen it with other clients. We can say, well, we know this works really well, or this is probably not the best way to go, but we want to keep the options open, meaning like if you look at the application templates for RAG pipelines, you'll see some that use like GPT, others that use Gemini, others that use Mistral or DeepSeek. We really want to give people a choice, and our developers are smart enough to make the choices that make the most sense for
Yeah,
them.
and on the LLM side, it change every week. So yeah, next week will be a new week. So are you comfortable with one of them? I can see the Mistral one and ChatGPT, but did you develop something specific for one of them, or it's all are equal? I mean, you can switch from Gemini to Mistral to ChatGPT or DeepSeek. No issue.
Yeah, you can switch from one to the other without
Okay.
any difficulty.
Okay, good. It makes sense. So you want
And
to yeah, you want to be to stay open, completely open to any other LLMs.
mhm.
Okay, good. It makes sense. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt because we have presented some use case from La Poste, but I've seen some others like F1 and uh,
Yeah. So I mean, as you see from the architecture diagrams, we'll have like the final use cases, which can be closer to AI apps and chatbots, real-time analytics, or transform data. And so we have use cases, of course, in those various categories. Um, so yeah, sure, happy to.
Yeah. How long it takes to deploy a kind of RAG, a standard RAG application? So maybe for sure it depends on the enterprise information or asset you want to integrate, but what's the average you have seen?
Yeah. So the way we see it is that we do have like developers like Intel, for instance. It took less than took them less than 1 hour. So this is actually like pretty impressive. In some companies where there's a lot of restriction around, let's say, SharePoint administration management and so on, we just need to make sure that we have a SharePoint administrator involved, for instance, to do the connection to the right data sources when this is done internally. But really the pipeline, like this kind of 1 hour ballpark when we have a developers that we're talking to, works well. And when we're talking like a full blown, let's say, enterprise use case, and we have like, we in a way lose sometimes in kind of access management, data management and so on, it still takes less than a month to be able to deliver the entire use case. um,
Okay, so it's 1 month is reasonable. I mean,
Yeah, and it can be shortened as like the moment we get the data access. Usually we just see that among kind of larger clients, it does take them a bit of time to enable all of this, because we do end up being in a number of fairly critical applications for our users. And we do have clients like NATO, of course, which put a nice, let's say, quality and security stamp on us. But there are still, let's say, checks that are really good for companies to do in any case, and this can take a few days.
okay. Do you have a system to evaluate different LLMs, or it's up to the customers to select the one he wants and you implement, or do you have some recommendation on that? Because this can be very painful.
Yeah, so we have um, we don't recommend an LLM as such unless we're working with a language that's not, um, let's say, mainstream. So we do have users who would need, like, I don't know, Danish support, and of course, not all LLMs perform equal when they're on languages that are not spoken by as many people as English, let's say. So in this case, we can do those recommendations, and then we'll do recommendations based on the requirements of the clients, which
Okay.
can really vary from one to the other. And sometimes it can be latency related. So if you want a really low latency, for instance, Mistral performs relatively well. And so we do provide like a way to have to generate evaluation metrics. So we
Mm.
actually have a notebook on this on our blog, which we can share if people who are listening to us are curious. Um, yeah.
Okay, good. So yeah, I think we can maybe we still have 2 or 3 minutes, so we are in time. We can maybe end with the use case. I've seen Intel F1. This is big name, and maybe we can spend some time doing covering those yeah, use cases.
Yeah. So on the F1 side, we had an F1 team that was encountering a number of issues with the solution that they were working with before. It wasn't Python based, and all the, let's say, coding and prototyping was putting a heavy load on a few people who knew how to use this kind of very specific language. And so this meant that developers throughout the various business lines were kind of stuck in building the new use cases, and it was considerably like slowing them down. And so what really they were looking for was a framework that would be allowing them to create like their own user-defined functions.
Okay.
So here, like as you can imagine, an F1 team is a team that's composed of fairly technical people, and so they have this knowledge on how to like build their algorithm and so on, and they just needed a tooling that would enable them to do just this with an incredible performance, because we're looking at a pretty high data throughput and latency requirements that are fairly low. So they wanted both to have this ability to create user-defined functions and to have a very low latency.
Yeah, I can see that. Less than two milliseconds. This is real time.
Yeah. It's funny because real time means a lot of things to a lot of people, and so those ones they're not kidding with real time.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much, Claire, for this briefing. What kind of roadmap do you have right now? Do you have some specific development in mind, ready to go to the market, or?
Yeah, so we'll keep on pushing some pretty exciting application templates. So we've had like feedback from the community, and we know kind of what they're asking for, feedback from our users as well. So we're incorporating all this feedback in the roadmap, and then we'll have also a few interesting developments around live AI. There was an article, pretty nice article in Forbes last week that was explaining our approach to this. So yeah, some of it is already, let's say, public.
So, bravo for that. We will publish the Forbes link to the community. Thank you, Claire. I wanted
Thanks
to
a
do
lot.
this interview for a long time now. We did it, and I wanted to do it before the conference, but no. Okay, we did now. Thank you for that. Congratulations for what you did the last 2 years, and hope we can have another talk later next year, maybe to see where you are. Maybe it will be the double of stars, maybe the triple of stars, 50,000 stars, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Merci Claire.
Thanks a lot. Merci.
À
Have a good
bientôt.
day.